For 7 years, he wore the same cologne. It wasn't about loyalty or even a particular love for the scent. It was just habit, the kind of unconscious gesture you stop thinking about. Every single morning, the same motion to sprays, neck and wrist, and then out the door. His life was built on these patterns. Predictable routes to work, familiar faces at the coffee shop. There was nothing particularly wrong with it all, but nothing particularly alive either. He had become so accustomed to the weight of routine that he didn't even notice it until the night it shattered. It was a late autumn Friday, the kind of evening where the crisp air nips at your skin just enough to make you walk a little faster. He'd been invited to a party he really didn't want to attend, a colleague's birthday in a small apartment, guaranteed to be too crowded and too loud. He almost stayed home. He almost surrendered to the comfort of his couch. But guilt can be a quiet architect, building decisions for you that you don't even remember making. So he went. The room smelled exactly as he'd expected. A mixture of spilled wine, warm bodies, and something vaguely floral he couldn't quite place. He found a spot near the window, half listening to a conversation, half drifting somewhere else entirely. And then she walked past him. Not towards him, just past. A complete stranger in a dark coat, her hair pulled back. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his existence. But as she moved through that narrow hallway, something in the air shifted. It was a trace, faint, almost nothing, but it reached him. And for reasons he couldn't begin to explain, he turned his head. The scent didn't announce itself with a loud crash. It arrived quietly, like a breath you've held for too long and finally release. It was subtle, completely unfamiliar. It had a certain weight to it, but without any heaviness. A warmth, but without any cloying sweetness. It felt intentional, composed, like it belonged to someone who knew exactly who they were and felt no need to prove it to anyone. He inhaled without meaning to, and in that single moment, something inside him went completely still. The noise of the party faded away. He didn't follow her. He didn't try to learn her name. He just stood there, frozen, caught in the afterimage of something he couldn't even see. The conversation around him continued laughter, the clinking of glasses, but he had fallen out of sync with it all. His mind kept replaying the moment, the crowded hallway, the graceful movement, the way the very air changed as she passed. It was an attraction, not in any way he recognized. It felt more like recognition, the recognition of something missing, something he had even known was absent from his life until it suddenly appeared right in front of him. He left the party early, walking home through the cold, empty streets. The city felt different somehow, sharper, more defined. The edges of buildings seemed clearer against the night sky. He kept trying to recall the scent, to rebuild it in his memory, but it was elusive, slipping away like a dream. All that remained was the feeling it left behind, a quiet disturbance, a tiny crack in the smooth surface of a life he thought was perfectly fine. The next morning, his hand reached for his usual bottle of cologne. He held it, looking at it as if for the first time. It smelled the same, woody, safe, painfully familiar. But now, it felt like a costume he'd been wearing for far too long. He put the bottle down. He didn't spray it. For the first time in 7 years, he walked out the door without it. The absence of the scent felt strange, like forgetting your keys or your wallet. But it also felt like taking a deeper breath. He started paying attention again. 2 scents. 2, the spaces he moved through. To all the small, daily choices he had automated out of existence. He started walking different routes to work. He ordered a different kind of coffee. He sat in a different seat on the train. He wasn't following a grand plan. He was just following a feeling. Something inside him had been disturbed, and he couldn't put it back the way it was. That woman's scent had opened a door he never even knew was locked. And now, he found he couldn't close it. Weeks went by. He never saw her again. He never learned her name, and he never smelled that specific fragrance again. But the shift inside him remained. He started noticing people differently, the way they carried themselves, the small moments of care they took in their appearance, the deliberate choices they made about how they wanted to be remembered in the world. He realized that for years, he had been trying not to be noticed. He was trying to blend in, to belong without ever standing out. And that scent, that invisible presence, had asked him a question he could no longer ignore. Who are you when no one is watching? So, he bought a new fragrance, something completely unfamiliar, something that required thought. It smelled nothing like the woman's. He wasn't trying to recreate that moment. He was trying to create his own. And when he wore it, he noticed people responded to him differently. It was subtle. A glance held for just a second longer. A conversation that went a little deeper. He couldn't say for sure if it was the scent itself or the confidence that wearing it gave him, but maybe there was no difference between the two. His routines began to change. Small things at first, then larger ones. He took on a challenging project at work that he'd been avoiding. He started saying no to social invitations that drained his energy. He started conversations with people he normally would have just walked past. The people around him noticed the change, not in a loud, obvious way, but in the quiet way your attention shifts when you realize someone has stopped performing and has simply started existing. He didn't become someone else. He just became more himself. And it all started with a moment he couldn't see, a fragrance he never touched, a stranger who would never know the impact she had. Years later, he still thinks about that night sometimes. The crowded hallway, the faint trace of something beautiful and unnamed. He wonders if she ever knew, if she understood the quiet power she carried with her. Or maybe it was just him. Maybe he was just a man who was ready to break, waiting for a kind of permission he didn't know he needed. In the end, the scent was never the answer. It was the question, and once that question is asked, it can't be unasked. One moment, one invisible shift in the air, and everything that came after moved differently. He never went back to his old cologne. He gave the bottle away, let it go completely, not because it was bad, but because it belonged to someone he no longer was. It belonged to the version of himself who moved through life on autopilot. The one who believed that safety was the same thing as satisfaction. The scent that passed him in the hallway that night didn't save him. It woke him up. And once you're truly awake, there's simply no returning to sleep. Thanks for listening. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing.